The control scaling function found in the control folder will allow us to give control of the scaling to the graphic operator. So the way this works is that we're going to go back and grab some type of function here. So let's use a sphere and we'll drag it down into the scene tree. Now whenever you're working with control objects or building something for Trio, you're going to want to put everything within a main group. So that's what we're going to do here, is add a group to the scene tree and put this container into the main group, so that when we go back into our control folder to drag these functions on here, everything is going to be set up automatically. So for instance, we want to use this control scaling, so I'm going to drag this down onto the sphere here, and when I do that, it automatically added this control object to the topmost group, which you need in order for Trio or Content Pilot or Viz Template Wizard to recognize this scene. So let's first go back real quick and just drag some type of material on this so that we'll just be able to see this better, and we'll come back into our scaling option here, or our scaling control function, and in the control scale plugin we again have this field identifier. Since it is our first control function in this scene, we're just going to leave that field ID at 1. We can give it a description, so if we want to type in here scale sphere or whatever, we can. Now we have a minimum input. So the minimum input is the least amount of numbers that the graphic operator will be allowed to enter. Same with the maximum input. So if you only want them to be able to enter a certain amount of variables, you can type it in here. There's a minimum scaling. So if you only ever wanted this sphere to get as small as a certain size, you could type that in here. Same with the maximum scaling. If you only ever wanted this sphere to get so big, you could type something in here, and here we'll just change this to 75 for instance. There's also a control X, control Y, control Z. We can turn these off individually, or we can leave them all on. If we leave them all on, that will give them the control to scale this all together at one size. If it's on X or Y or Z, then they'll have the option to scale this on the individual parameters. Now the input value is the variable that should be normalized depending on what these numbers are up here in the minimum input to the maximum scaling. So the stop keyframe, if you have your scaling animated, then you need to tell it where exactly on that timeline animation that you want this keyframe or the scaling to occur. Either at the beginning of the animation or the middle of the animation or the end of the animation. And you could put a keyframe or a stop keyframe in there to determine that. So once we have this all set up here, we're going to demonstrate it in Trio. So before I do that, I just need to save this scene, and we're just going to call it control scale or something like that. So I'm going to click OK. Now we're going to go into Trio. So once we're in Trio, we're going to come into the page import or import scenes, and we're going to find this scene that we were just working on. And here we can come to our control scale, and we can import it 3 ways. I can double click it, I can highlight it and hit import, or I can drag it left into this window here. And I'm going to go back into the page editor. When I double click on my control scale scene here in the lower left or in the tab fields, you can see that we have an option here for scaling. And in the upper right editing window, we have our option here, or our variable that we're going to change to scale this. So now as I come in and increase this number, it scales this particular sphere up. So this is what the control scaling does on an object. And we can put this on any type of container within Vizrt Artist to control the scaling.